My sister lied about getting fired to make me feel less alone, but when her coworkers sent me a thank you card, everything fell apart. My sister Marianne and I have always been close. After my divorce, I moved back to our hometown and stayed with her, thinking I was the broken one while she still had her life together. Then she told me she'd been fired, said we could be in it together. I believed her. Months later, her supposed coworkers sent me a thank you card for a care package. And the truth unraveled from there. She was never fired. She lied to make me feel less alone, but in the process, I felt more betrayed than ever. The conversation that unraveled everything happened over a dining room table cluttered with jigsaw puzzle pieces and half-eaten lemon bars. Marianne opened the envelope like it was just another bill. I remember her pausing mid-bite, reading the card silently while I waited for some clarification. "It's from the team at Hartford," I said, already sensing something was off. "Why would they be thanking me if you don't work there anymore?" She blinked. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. That's when the lie collapsed under its own weight. I should probably back up a bit. My name's Melanie. I'm 42, recently divorced, and until last year, I lived in New York City with my now ex-husband Pascal. We were married for 14 years, and while that sounds like a decent run by most standards, anyone who's survived a slow unravel knows that time doesn't mean much when you're drifting apart. The end came after our third miscarriage. That one felt like the final blow. We were ghosts of ourselves, walking around a perfectly curated apartment full of reminders of what we didn't have. One morning, Pascal said, "I feel like I'm failing at grieving properly. And I don't know how to do this with you anymore." No one was screaming or cheating or smashing dishes. It was just over. After the divorce, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd left my job, freelance writing gigs had slowed to a trickle, and I couldn't afford the city alone. I didn't want to go back to our apartment. Even the sound of the floors creaking made me think of Pascal padding barefoot through the hallway with a mug of black coffee. So, I called Marianne. She didn't hesitate. "Come home," she said. "I've got the guest room." Marianne had always been the dependable one. She stayed in Connecticut, bought a quaint Cape Cod-style home in Wethersfield, and worked at Hartford Insurance Group in compliance. She was the kind of person who actually flossed daily and mailed birthday cards on time. I envied her stability. I think part of me resented it too, in the way we sometimes resent the people we love when their lives seem easier than ours. When I moved in with her, I brought 2 suitcases, a blender I couldn't part with, and a heart that felt like it had been hollowed out with a spoon. Marianne didn't push me to talk. She made herbal tea in the evenings, and she let me cry when I needed to without filling the space with platitudes. About 2 weeks in, she mentioned she'd been laid off. "They're restructuring," she said, stirring honey into her mug. "Half my department's gone. I'm out." I was shocked. Marianne without her job? It was like hearing the sun had stopped rising. But she took it in stride. Said she was using the time to decompress. "I've saved enough to float for a bit. Honestly, it's a blessing. I need a break." We fell into a quiet rhythm. Mornings were slow, coffee, old records, the occasional walk if we felt up to it. Some days we didn't get out of our pajamas. At night we'd curl up under the same blanket and watch reruns of Cold Case while I nursed a glass of red wine that never seemed to get finished. There was something comforting in how stagnant everything felt. Like if I could just pause my life long enough, maybe I'd eventually stop feeling like a failure. Marianne never made me feel like a burden. In fact, her layoff made it feel like we were weathering the storm together. She even joked about how she was getting good at doing nothing, which made me feel better about how unproductive I was. But then, one afternoon in late March, I decided to do something kind for her former coworkers. She talked about them often, and said they'd been supportive through the layoff. I'd been baking to pass the time, so I put together a care package: cranberry walnut cookies, some fancy teas, even a little handwritten note. I asked Marianne if she could deliver it the next time she saw any of them. She agreed, smiled, and said, "They'll love it." I forgot about it until 2 weeks later when that cream-colored envelope came in the mail. The card was friendly, even cheerful, thanking me for the goodies Marianne brought into the office. The words stung like paper cuts. The confusion turned into suspicion. I sat there staring at it, trying to make it make sense. Maybe she had stopped by to drop them off? Maybe she was just visiting the office? But the note implied familiarity, daily camaraderie, and that didn't track with the story she told me. That night, I waited until after dinner. I slid the card across the table like it was evidence in a crime thriller. Her smile faded. She stared at the handwriting for a long time. "I thought you got fired," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't," she finally admitted. "I didn't get fired." Just like that. My heart twisted in confusion and anger. "What?" "I needed to be home with you. I couldn't keep going to work and leaving you here like that." "You were unraveling, Mel." I blinked. "So you lied." "I wanted you to feel like you weren't the only one going through something. I thought maybe if we were both figuring it out, you wouldn't feel so alone." The betrayal landed slowly, like water seeping into drywall. I stood up. My skin felt flushed. I was grieving my marriage, my body, my life, Marianne. "And you thought what?" "That lying would." "What?" "Bond us?" I didn't know what else to do. "You were slipping away." Her voice cracked, but I couldn't feel sympathy. "Not then. You could have just been honest." She nodded, silent. And I packed my bags that night, not dramatically, not with screaming, just quietly. Carefully. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I rented a small one-bedroom in New Haven above a bakery. It was noisy and the pipes were old, but the smell of rising dough every morning gave me a reason to open the windows. I didn't speak to Marianne for 3 months. She tried. She emailed. Short things. Polite. "Hope you're well," kind of stuff. I deleted them without reading past the subject line. I wasn't ready. I found part-time work at a regional magazine. Started therapy. Sat in front of blank Word documents until they turned into paragraphs, then pages. I wasn't healed, but I wasn't numb either. That was progress. When Marianne's letter arrived, 6 pages, handwritten, I read it twice in one sitting. She explained everything. How the panic attacks had started 6 months before I moved in. How going to work felt like walking into a glass box every day. How she didn't know how to ask for help because she was always the strong one. "I wasn't fired," she wrote, "but I was breaking." I folded the pages gently, slid them back into the envelope, and placed them in my nightstand drawer. And I sat with that for a long time. I didn't respond right away. I reread the letter more times than I care to admit, underlining words, sometimes just sitting with a sentence until I felt the ache of it. I wasn't fired, but I was breaking. It was a strange sentence to forgive, because it felt honest, and yet it came on the heels of so much dishonesty. I kept thinking, if she had told me from the start, could we have handled it better? Would I have been strong enough to carry her while I was still picking up the pieces of myself? But deep down, I knew I hadn't been. I was hollow when I moved in. She probably saw it the way only a sister can, the dull stare, the way I wandered from room to room with no direction. She didn't know how to help, so she joined me in the darkness. Still, knowing she lied daily, was a hard pill to swallow. Around that time, I ran into an old high school friend, Raquel, at the bookstore in New Haven. She was browsing the staff picks table with her daughter, and we caught up the way people do in small towns where nobody truly disappears. She didn't ask about Pascal. She didn't need to, people already knew. What she did ask was surprising: "Is your sister still at Hartford Insurance?" I swear I saw her at the Panera on Asylum Street during her lunch break last week. I forced a smile. "Yeah, she's still there." My stomach twisted. Even though I knew the truth now, hearing that she'd gone back, like nothing had happened, made it feel worse somehow. Like the whole thing had been a costume she could just take off when it suited her. The resentment came in waves after that. One night, I was walking home from work, passing the river, watching the ducks skimming the surface like they had nowhere urgent to be. I sat on a bench and opened my notes app, intending to draft an angry message. I had one finger poised to type "How dare you pretend to be broken when I actually was," but then I stopped. Because the truth is, she was broken too. Just differently. And I began to realize, we both did what we could with the pain we had. We just used different shields. Mine was silent. Hers was fiction. A few weeks later, I sent her a reply. Not 6 pages. Not poetic. Just a single paragraph in an email. I got your letter. I'm still processing it, but I wanted you to know I read it. I hear you. She replied that same night. I'm here whenever you're ready. That exchange opened a slow drip of communication. Nothing dramatic. An article link here, a recipe there. She sent me photos of her garden. I sent her a picture of a latte with a foam heart that the barista had accidentally nailed perfectly. And eventually, we met for coffee. She picked a quiet spot in West Hartford. I arrived first. She came in wearing a navy sweater I remembered from last winter, the one she always wore when we curled up for our cold case marathons. For a moment, everything about her looked the same, except for the weariness in her eyes. I saw my own grief mirrored there, just stretched in a different shape. I'm sorry, she said, before I even took my first sip. I nodded. I didn't know what to do, Mel. I thought I was helping, but I know now that I made it worse. I waited, because there was more. I could see it pressing behind her eyes. I kept going to work after you left. I pretended like nothing had happened. But I was scared every day. That I'd run into someone who knew. That you'd never speak to me again. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I said something that surprised both of us. I felt less alone with you. Her eyes welled up immediately. I think that's what hurts the most. You did help me, Marianne. You held me together in ways I don't even think I realized at the time. But you did it under a lie. And now I don't know which parts were real. All of it, she said. Everything but the reason I was there. We sat there for a long time, saying very little after that. Just drinking coffee like two people rebuilding a bridge one brick at a time. Over the following months, we didn't go back to being as close as we once were, but we weren't estranged either. We were somewhere in between, in that liminal space between forgiveness and trust. She started therapy too. Told me she was finally facing some things she'd buried for years, not just about work, but about her own expectations, her perfectionism, her need to be the stable one. The reliable sister. Hearing her admit that, without the usual brave face, made her feel more real to me than she ever had before. And, slowly, I started to understand that love between siblings is not always unconditional. Sometimes it's messy and complex and built on years of silent assumptions and unspoken contracts. You hold each other's histories. You hold each other's failures. And sometimes, you lie for each other. Sometimes, you lie to each other. Out of love, out of fear, out of desperation. That doesn't make it right. But it makes it human. Summer passed like a slow breath. I started noticing the small things again, the way the leaves rustled on Orange Street in the early evening, the quiet warmth of bookstores, the comfort of routine. My little apartment above the bakery began to feel like a home, not just a hiding place. Marianne and I kept in touch, more consistently now, but still with caution. A few phone calls, occasional Sunday coffee. We never went back to the dynamic we had when I was living with her. Something had shifted, and we both felt it, like we were two people who had weathered a storm together but now stood on opposite sides of the debris. Still, I wanted to believe we could rebuild. But trust is slow. Especially when it's been fractured in a place as intimate as sisterhood. One morning in early October, I was invited to a small local event, a reading for regional writers hosted at the New Haven Public Library. My editor had nominated me to share a personal essay I'd written about grief. I almost declined, but something in me wanted to be seen, wanted to speak my story aloud. I didn't tell Marianne I'd be reading. I wasn't ready to have her in the room yet. The essay was called The Empty Chair at the End of the Table. It was about my first Christmas alone after the divorce, how silence echoed louder in the presence of memory, how I had left a place setting for Pascal without realizing it until I went to pour the wine. When I stepped up to the podium, my hands shook. But then, in the second row, just off to the side, I saw her. Marianne. She hadn't said she was coming. She sat with her hands in her lap, wearing that same navy sweater again, eyes already glassy. I read the essay. I stumbled a little through the middle, had to pause once to swallow a lump in my throat, but I got through it. And when it was over, the audience clapped, a kind, warm applause, the kind that doesn't fill a room but still manages to hold you upright. Marianne didn't approach me right away. She waited until I'd spoken to a few other people, then came forward slowly, unsure. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. "You wrote about things I never had words for." I looked at her, really looked, and at that moment, I didn't feel angry anymore. Just deep, slow sadness for everything we'd both carried alone for so long. "Thank you," I said. It was the safest response I could offer. We walked to the cafe next door, a tiny place with foggy windows and mismatched chairs. We didn't talk much. Just sipped our drinks, the silence between us no longer charged, just fragile, like a snowflake balanced on skin. "I think I should have told you the truth from the start," she said after a while. "But I didn't know how to be the strong one and fall apart." I nodded. "I think I would have understood. If you'd let me." She was quiet for a long time. "I'm trying now," she said. "To let people in. Not just you. I tell my therapist things I've never said out loud." I smiled faintly. "That's good." We parted with a hug, cautious, careful, but real. And for the first time in nearly a year, I felt like we might eventually be okay. After that, our communication became more fluid. Still no daily calls, still no Sunday mornings under the same blanket, but more honest. We shared things again, real things. I sent her a short story I'd written. She told me she'd applied for a lateral transfer at work to get out of her department, said it still made her heart race every morning, walking into the same building where she'd once spun a lie she couldn't untangle. "I want a fresh start," she said on the phone one night. "Something that doesn't make me feel like I'm hiding in plain sight." "You deserve that," I said. And I meant it. One Friday evening, she came down to New Haven, and we had dinner at a little Italian place I loved. She brought a small gift, a hardcover journal with pressed flowers on the cover. "I saw it in a shop downtown," she said, placing it on the table. "Made me think of you." Inside was a short inscription, "For the stories you're still afraid to tell. One day, they'll need a voice too." I closed it slowly, feeling a tightness in my chest. "I'm not afraid," I said after a moment. "Not anymore." Marianne smiled. "Then you're already halfway there." It was a quiet dinner, punctuated by long pauses and shared glances. We didn't need to say everything. Just enough. It was our way. After she left, I sat on my couch and opened the journal. I wrote 3 lines that night. My sister lied to me. Then she told the truth. We're somewhere in between now, and maybe that's okay. A few weeks after our dinner, Marianne called me on a Thursday evening with an unusual tone in her voice. "I got the transfer," she said. "Different departments. Still in compliance, but a new team. Clean slate." I congratulated her. She sounded lighter. Hopeful, even. But something in her pause told me there was more. "I also found out something. And I don't know if I should tell you. But I think you deserve to know." I held my breath. "Do you remember that thank you card from Anjali? The one that outed the whole thing?" "Of course." "Well," she exhaled slowly, "it turns out someone in my department, someone I used to be close to, knew I was lying. She saw the package come in, realized you were under the impression I'd been laid off. And she mailed that card on purpose. I sat still. Wait, what? She told someone else later that she thought it was unethical the way I was living with you under false pretenses. Said it felt manipulative. She thought sending the card would be a gentle way to make the truth come out. I let that sink in. My heart started pounding, not with anger, but something else, opportunity. Who was it? I asked. Mel. Does it matter? It did. Not for vengeance, not exactly. But because a part of me, the part that had sat for months in the shadows of my own life, wanted to reclaim something. Not to hurt anyone, but to remind them, and maybe remind myself, that I wasn't just some grieving, fragile woman licking her wounds in someone else's guest room. I just want to know, I said softly. Marianne hesitated, then relented. Her name's Paige. Paige Goldstein. That name rang a bell. Marianne had mentioned her a few times over the years. Sharp. Competitive. The kind who believed in rules more than people. Thank you, I said, ending the call not long after. And then I started planning. Let me be clear, I didn't want to ruin Paige. I'm not that kind of person. But the idea that she had orchestrated my humiliation, even for what she thought were moral reasons, stuck in my throat like a bone. So I decided to write about it. Not her, by name, but everything she'd done became the beating heart of a new essay. It was about betrayal disguised as righteousness, about the way some people mask interference as integrity. I called it The Quiet Saboteur. I wove in every ounce of confusion and vulnerability I'd felt after receiving that card, the way the truth hadn't empowered me but unmoored me. I wrote about how kindness with an agenda can still cut like cruelty. How doing the right thing doesn't give you a free pass for breaking someone else's reality. My editor at the magazine loved it. We published it in print and online. Within 3 days, it went locally viral. Emails poured in, women, mostly, writing to say they'd experienced similar betrayals. Some had had family secrets exposed by coworkers. Others had endured helpful interventions that were more about control than compassion. The essay became part of a bigger piece on workplace boundaries. Public radio even reached out to record me for a short feature. I sat in a quiet studio one Wednesday morning and read my words into a microphone, imagining Paige, the real one, hearing them from behind her polished desk, recognizing the contours of her own actions in my carefully veiled lines. Marianne called me the day after it aired. She knows it's about her, she said. She's furious. Is she denying it? No. She's just embarrassed. Says you twisted the story. I chuckled. I told the story. Yeah, Marianne said after a pause. You did. I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. I hadn't named her. I hadn't even mentioned her role explicitly. But the truth, when dressed well, speaks loud enough without needing names. The next time I saw Marianne in person, it was at our childhood home. Our parents had passed years ago, but we still kept the place. We were finally getting around to clearing out the attic. Amid the dust and old boxes, we found a photo album, the two of us in elementary school, one of me with missing front teeth and Marianne standing behind me, arms protectively around my shoulders. She looked at it and smiled. You always looked up to me. I nodded. And you always tried to protect me. I still want to, she said. I know. But maybe now we just protect each other. With honesty. That night, I left the attic with a few boxes and a full heart. Not just because we'd finally begun to mend something real, but because I had done something for myself too. That essay, that little piece of revenge, hadn't been about hurting Paige. It had been about reclaiming my voice. In the end, I didn't need Marianne to fall from grace, or Paige to face public shame. I didn't need some dramatic reckoning or a confrontation in a parking garage. I just needed the world to hear my version of the story. And they did.